Okay, Minister On, I wanted this to be a conversation, a free-flowing conversation.
Oh, yes.
I know that you did great during the keynote speech. You were brought in as a keynote speaker for the Nishan Forum, the 10th of its kind. Maybe you can begin by telling us a bit about your impressions coming to this forum this time around.
I would say this is my very first experience in attending Nishan Forum on Civilizations. It is indeed a good eye-opener, particularly for people like me who is still on the learning curve as far as civilization exchange is concerned. And I do hope perhaps on this foundation, now more initiatives along the line of civilization exchange could be conducted from time to time, particularly between China and all the other BRI partner countries, including Malaysia.
What do you think Confucius and Confucian thinking symbolizes today?
I could see that the Confucianism and Chinese culture in general, they do have a wide latitude for inclusivity, particularly when you come to things like diverse cultures, diverse norms across the world, notably in the multipolar world today. We certainly need to have a greater latitude for inclusiveness. And in this respect, now I realize that Confucianism provides a very good embodiment for such inclusive accommodation when you come to coexistence of cultures or civilizational norms. Sometimes people may take it as something on the collision path, but to the Chinese, particularly the ancient Chinese, that is not true. No, because we can learn to accommodate, we can learn to learn from others. And I wish to see the teaching of Confucianism now could be made even simpler, more comprehensible now to people, particularly our younger generation, to understand, to appreciate more. Now, before we just leave it aside, because after all, now this is the kind of wisdom, the wealth of wisdom that we inherited from our forefathers. And I see no reason why we should choose to discard it when it can serve our very purpose in addressing the contemporary challenges.
But why do you think there has been some misunderstanding or misrepresentation about Confucianism emphasizes norms, authoritarianism, emphasizing man over women, order, not necessarily in a good way? What would you say to them?
Well, if we were to trace back the interpretations of all this saying of wisdom, now one would easily find that we have easily more than one school of thought, one school of interpretation as far as the Confucian teachings are concerned. And many a time, those who choose to demonize or to vilify Confucian teachings, they tend to look at it from the feudalistic perspective. Because after all, we cannot deny that Confucianism was born in the feudal age. And because of that, a lot of unfair labeling now has been added to the teachings of Confucian. And they fail to see the relevance of Confucian teachings now in the contemporary context. This is first thing I must say, right? And on top of that, now people, they choose to interpret it in the narrow sense of Confucian teachings. To me, it's nothing but an act of belittling the significance of Confucian wisdom.
And also, if you think about Jisha Academy, which I was talking to you about, that existed first of all over 2,000 years ago, which was believed to be one of the first state-sponsored higher learning institutions back in the day, where different schools of thought contend. To this day, we're holding the 10th Nishan Forum on World Civilizations. Do you think this forum has potential to grow into a modern-day Jisha Academy of sort?
Oh, why not? Because here again, as I said, we are inheriting the wealth of wisdom from our forefathers. And since we had now such a setup in our history, and that again could serve as a good template now for us to build more entities of similar kind, but of course to be imbued with modern age interpretations. And certainly I could see that now this could further be expanded now into now some kind of think tanks, which are even more inclusive, more accommodative, in the light that the Chinese culture always choose to embrace diversity. Diversity now in terms of norms, even polities, and also academic thoughts. All this, in fact, has been part of our history. And I see no reason why today we can't do the same. We can do it even with a more macro perspective.
And Minister Yang, when you think about different cultures coexisting with one another, the Western culture apparently emphasizes on debate and confrontation. If you look at the apparent example of Joe Biden's debate recently with Donald Trump, the United States, as we all know, is a very confrontational society. Yeah. Where primary school kids up to high school, university have debating teams. You have to defend yourself constantly, even in front of a large mass for even solving a mathematical problem. Why you do it that way? Public speaking is much emphasized, whereas in East Asia, in the Chinese cultural communities, Greater China area, we tend to prefer to work in a quiet room and bring good results. Under these circumstances, such differences, how should we function as a descendant of this, Confucianism and Chinese culture?
The practice of societal norms many a time varies from country to country, and even in Southeast Asia, for instance. On one hand, of course, we have inherited the norms, the traditional norms, our cultures. Now, from various civilizations, like Chinese civilizations, Indian civilization, or even as Islamic civilizations. But on the other hand, we have been under constant influence of the Western values. And again, when we talk about the habits, or rather the cultures of debating over issues or public discourse, we call that. Now, again, that varies. That varies from people to people. And we can't say that those who are not in favor of public discourse, they are considered inferior in terms of intellectuality. I don't buy that. Now, because many a time it depends on the pattern of behavior prevalent in a particular society. And I have seen so far, now, students who might appear to be quite quiet in the class, some of them, they could really shine, end of the day. Now, for instance, like in Malaysia, now we have diverse streams of education at the elementary stage. Now we have the Chinese language primary schools. The school children, many a time, they are not encouraged to defy the authorities, right?
Hierarchy, norms.
Perhaps people might argue that that is part of the hierarchical heritage that we inherit from Confucianism. But again, now, if you were to take a look at the Western cultures, or rather schools of different lingua franca, for instance, like English medium schools, we call that. Yeah. Those days we had that, right? It was totally different. It was totally different. And you might be encouraged to speak up. And sometimes, you know, there might even be occasions where you turn out to be the one who defy, you know, the teacher who conduct the class. And that, again, is still tolerable within certain limits. Of course, not to the extent of turning the class upside down in the extreme case, but at the very least, I could see the latitude of tolerance. It looks greater.
Yeah, I think we need to have the best of both worlds. Otherwise, we can be in trouble. I mean, in the traditional Chinese system, which I've been through, sometimes you study without really learning. Sometimes if you overemphasize on formality, rote learning, memorization-based exams, you exceed in exams, you're good at techniques and skills at taking exams, but not necessarily at, you know, translating them into skills.
Yes and no. I had gone through that. Yeah. And I could remember.
Yeah, I mean, I like the part that where they inject discipline in you, yeah, which you benefit from.
Yeah, well, actually, now, at certain age, of course, you were forced to memorize certain things, certain passages, particularly the recital of poems or even some classical Chinese passages without much understanding. But that doesn't deter you from appreciating the essence of the passage or the poems at later age. Now, particularly when you grow up with more experience, more exposure. I took it as some kind of enlightenment at later stage.
So Minister Ong, one last question. What is your take on the significance of Nishan Forum? How does that carry forward President Xi's very important initiative, as you may have heard, the Global Civilization Initiative?
I did spend some time to study the 3 global initiatives rolled out by China. On top of that, of course, the GCI, the Global Civilization Initiative, I think this is crucial. Because until today, we must acknowledge that out there are still a lot of countries, particularly those developing countries and emerging economies from the global south. In fact, no, they have yet to have the kind of cultural confidence, right, in pursuing their own path, their own trajectory of nationhood and economic development. So GCI, in a way, in fact, is a good template. It's a good template where China managed to demystify the common myth that modernization or economic prosperity could only be brought about by Westernization. I think this is crucial, right? And so far, now from what I gather, right, the Nishan Forum, particularly the forum this year, right, the theme is very clear. The theme is centered around civilizational dialogues that is dedicated to promoting inter-civilization understanding and appreciation. I think that is crucial. To my understanding, of course, the people may argue that, well, so long as we have good translators, we have good translation who can translate the wisdom of Oriental culture, Chinese cultures into English, that would solve the problem. To me, that is not adequate. Now, because on top of interpretation, language interpretation, be it from Chinese to English and vice versa, or from classical Chinese to contemporary language, we need one more thing, that is the comprehensibility of norms, cultural norms, civilizational norms of Chinese cultures. And many a time, to the Westerners, to the non-Chinese, or rather to those who don't really understand Chinese civilization, to them certain norms, certain Chinese norms may sound incomprehensible to them. So we have to understand what their rules are and how we came to such a, such a position that now we have such norms. For instance, like now in the global governance, we say that we embrace diversity, and even when the country is getting stronger and become a global power, it doesn't mean that we have to be hegemonic. So all this, to certain people, in fact, they might not believe it. They might still harbor a fair bit of misgiving or disbelief. And we have to tell them that from history, we have gone through that. We have gone through that. And why so? Why must we behave so? Now, because of our cultural or civilization DNA. We don't need to be a big bully now before we can help reset the global order.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Hub on CGTN, brought to you from Nishan in Eastern China's Shandong province. I'm Wang Guan. I'll see you again soon.